Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this WorkPoint partner webinar. We are really happy to have you all here. Sorry for the bit of a delay in today's webinar. We had a little bit of a technicality issue, but hopefully it's going well now. My name is Simone La Fontaine, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about how WorkPoint 365 can work as a case management solution. I'll tap into the needs of the case-driven organizations and also how WorkPoint tackles these needs. In the later half of the webinar, I will be joined by Allan Juncher Pedersen, our technical product manager, who will give you an introduction to the new features in WorkPoint 365 version 3.9, where some of these features are really also tapping into some of the needs for case-driven organizations. They're not dedicated to case-driven organizations, but you will see, hopefully, how they can be used to meet the needs and the day-to-day processes and business functions of case-driven organizations. So the first half of this webinar will be very business-oriented, while the second half will move a little bit towards the more technical side. Now, first of all, I want to start out by talking a little bit about the needs of case-driven organizations. So most of you are probably very familiar with WorkPoint 365 as a project document management solution. But what we can see is that both our customers and are often moving towards a more case-oriented way of working, and quite a few of you have also delivered case management solutions rather than project management solutions. So I want to just spend a little bit time on taking a look at where are the differences between it, what characterizes a case-driven organization. It's not a black and white thing. There are similarities between cases and projects, but there are also, on an organization level, some differences that I will try to tap a little bit into. We'll take a few questions later on in this session, so please submit them in the Q&A area. A case-driven organization often have multiple cases running in parallel, and often the single case worker will have manage multiple cases all at once. So cases are like projects in some way, defined by having a start and an end date, or at least a defined time span that can sort of vary depending on the case type. But they follow some standard processes and have a defined time range. But you have a lot of them as a caseworker usually in one. And unlike with projects, cases are much more handled by a single caseworker with a few internal or external stakeholders or input providers. So when you're working on a lot of different cases all at once, you need somewhere to get a central overview of what tasks do I have that are nearing their deadline? Are there any outstanding actions? What's the status across all the cases that I'm managing? Because if you have 25 cases and you're at your hand, it's a lot of time to have to dive deeply into each one of them to get a good status. You need that on a little bit higher level. If you're in a management position in a case-driven organization, you'll probably need for having an overview of either your team, or it could be the full department, to make sure that, okay, all the cases that my team or my department is responsible for, are we on track? Are we meeting deadlines? Are things following procedure? So the general need for overview is very big when you have a lot of different cases at once. Now, in these days, time is a really precious resource. And when you have a lot of different cases, you need to increase your efficiency a lot. And that also means that you need to cut down on tasks that are manual and don't give a lot of value. And that means that systems should be supporting the caseworker in an automated and controlled fashion. Are the right documents available at the right time? Are all the mandatory tasks remembered? Do I meet my deadline? What is the right procedure for this case? Those questions cannot be left on the shoulders on the human caseworker. You need the system to support those questions and to ensure that the defined procedures and are followed, and whatever is necessary is available when necessary. So you cut down on the manual work to give free up space for doing the work that really matters. Now, to increase efficiency, you need structure, because if every information and your documents, your emails and everything is cluttered all around and scattered in your system, you waste time by having to search manually for things and be frustrated that something that you felt were there all of a sudden isn't. And that frustration can be shared not just in case-driven organizations, but again, if you have a lot of cases where this is an issue, then it really adds up. So your case management solution needs to provide a well-managed structure to ensure that you, as a caseworker, can work efficiently and that data and information is stored rightly and in a secure fashion. Just a little bit about some of the case-driven organizations that we either have a very close relation to or in our customer portfolio. That can be accountants, it can be unions or member organizations, NGOs, public institutions. It could also be semi-public institutions. You can have regulatory organizations. We even have a case story of an undertaker, or it could also be, it doesn't need to be the whole organization. It can also be a department that handles cases. For example, if you are a large firm where you have a department that handle customer requests, or they handle orders or complaints, which then you can sort of have a need for case management in an organization that might elsewise be more project oriented. For example, if they are producing large buildings, for example. So the case-driven organization is not just one type of organization. It's a lot of different types of organizations, but they share these similarities about you have a lot of cases that you're managing all at once, and you need this overview, and you need structure, and you need efficiency. Now I want to talk a little bit more on what does WorkPoint then do to sort of try and meet these things, and what do we these needs, and where do we tap in? What kind of our various functions do we see supporting these needs? I'm not going to dive into the technicality of all the various functions, but it's just to give you an inspiration to, okay, when I'm sitting talking with a potential customer and they are bringing up this issue, what do I know that WorkPoint has to meet this? First of all, one thing that we can really see is that WorkPoint is a really strong tool for supporting the life cycle management of cases. And especially also when you have different types of cases that follow different procedures. We have our stage model concept that really can function as the structural framework for the case life cycle. And you also have the option to defining different stage models for the different case types. So you're not forcing the customer to only to follow one procedure across all their cases. They can differ this, they can nuance it to their needs. You might have some cases that also require some restraints before they can move on in their life cycle. and that can be defined for some, while others might be a simple new ongoing archived type of case. A different thing that we also are going to touch on a little bit on later today is that we have now the option for defining different standard tasks for different case types. And I know Allan will touch at least a little on this, but it's really about supporting the caseworker in, okay, I have this case and the organization has defined this procedure, then I know I must complete these actions or tasks in order to complete my case. So that's a really strong way of, again, securing and automating the case management process. As I just briefly touched on, we have the option for setting up what we call stage restraints or stage gates, which can ensure that if you have mandatory elements in your process, then they can need to be met before you can move on in the stage life cycle. It could, for example, be that you need to have a confirmation from your customer before moving on to delivering something, or before closing out the case that you have started up with them. Again, related to this stage framework, there's also this the option of defining that you can define your documents in a template library and assign these documents to different stages, so that the user, the caseworker, doesn't have to remember that, oh, at this time in my case process, I need to go and fetch this document. It can be populated into the case as a stand automatically. So, and if that document is a mandatory document for moving further on in the life cycle, then the user will have it easily at hand to complete it in order to move on. Now, there's also the whole thing about creating a dynamic system. We can, again, it's a way of simplifying the work for the caseworker by refining WorkPoint as a solution. So we can use our action management engine, you could almost say, to automate the life cycle. Make sure that when the different stage restraints are completed, the case is moving across its life cycle. So it's a way of freeing up some of that manual labor that the caseworker would elsewise have to do. Now, I hope that you're all quite familiar with WorkPoint as a good way for structuring information. That shouldn't be news to all here on this webinar, at least I hope. But really, in WorkPoint's strength in ensuring that information is structured and is well governed is also the foundation for making sure that when we need to create this overview, as I talked a little bit about earlier on, about, okay, what are my ongoing cases, what are my outstanding tasks, I can see that. So by structuring information and structuring cases and structuring tasks and so forth, we can use functionalities like aggregation or search to crawl across the solution and creating what we almost like to call like a central cockpit for looking across your entire case portfolio. And that can be tailored to meet the need of the individual caseworker, but also on a management level. Now, again, tapping into this thing about efficiency that I talked a little bit on earlier is also accessibility, because you're most efficient when you're working in a familiar interface. Again, not a new thing, but remember that WorkPoint Express really creates this direct entrance from some of the most commonly used tools in the Office suite. You can manage your emails in WorkPoint. You can collaborate with your team in Teams, and you can also complete your contracts in Word and your calculations in Excel. So again, it's what we see as sort of the strength, is that you can enable the caseworker to work in those familiar interfaces, and still have their whole case management solution right at hand. Now, I just mentioned Teams, and I just want to spend a few more minutes on that one, because there are different ways of seeing, okay, how do I, if I want to utilize the Teams platform as a way of collaborating within my case management organization or my case department, you can do that in different ways. And it really depends on what's the need and the appetite for the organization. It could be set up that you have a channel tab for your team members to look directly into their case portfolio. So it's a simple window in that is close at hand if that's how you work. It can also be that, and this is a thing that we are going in the future to elaborate even more on. We have delivered this in a few places, and hopefully a few of you have seen a demo on this, is that we can actually start now to build dedicated Teams apps for customers for their, in this case, case management solutions. So they can have an app where I say, okay, this is where I go and manage my cases as a user. So Teams all of a sudden becomes an interface into WorkPoint. So again, depends what's the need. We don't want to decide what's right and wrong. We just want to provide the options. In this way, where WorkPoint tries to lift a lot of not issues, but meet a lot of needs for the case-driven organizations, we also know that it's not only WorkPoint. You need to have other tools. You need to have integrations between those tools. So WorkPoint 365 now already offers out-of-the-box integrations to a variety of different third-party products. I've listed a few here, like Bluebeam and Sigma. Perhaps Nintex Workflows is also familiar to some of you, or for those of you who are perhaps dealing with accountants that are very case-driven, some of them might also have be working with Caseware, for example, a common accountant tool. But you also, as partners, have the options of creating your own integrations. We have seen examples of integrations from systems between SAP, for example, or Salesforce, and then into WorkPoint. We have also tried to create a flexible integration option in our Power Connector, which we are continuously developing on, because we can really see that it offers quite a lot of good entrances for you. Now, I know I can't really leave out this quote, not quote, but mention about the Power Connector without saying that, yes, we know that right now our Power Connector is by Microsoft listed as a premium connector, and we are trying to challenge this stamp it has gotten, because we know that by it being a premium connector, unless your customers have quite a lot of licenses or needs on the Power Platform already, depending on how they work, it might seem like an expensive option. We are trying to sort of push back on Microsoft on this point, and hopefully we will see it becoming what they call a standard connector in the future. So just to give a brief summary until I will hand over the word to Allan. The needs of the case-driven organizations is when it comes to case document management and information management is really related to the need for overview, for structure, control, and automation, because these four things together increases the efficiency in which caseworkers can manage and handle their cases in these busy times that we are in now. And the way that WorkPoint tries to tap into this is regarding life cycle management. We talked a little bit about the stage model as the main structural framework. We talked about templates, not just for documents, but also for tasks. And then we also talked about the option for stage gates to make sure that you have this control in the case lifecycle. Another thing we discussed was also the need for structure and overview. We talked about how WorkPoint is a solid solution for creating a good information structure, and how we can use aggregation and search functionalities for creating overviews for different customer and the different user types. We talked also about accessibility and collaboration in terms of our integration to the Office suite, to WorkPoint Express, and also our integration options to Teams. And then lastly, we touched upon the various integration opportunities that we have, both out of the box options and integrations. We have the Power Connector, and then also, of course, the option for what we call partner-driven integrations. So now I just will ask my colleague Allan, is there any questions? It seems that either I explained everything, or I explained it well, or you haven't had a chance yet to type in your question. If question comes, just post them, and we will take them in the end. But for now, I will give the word to Allan, who will give you an introduction to the new functionalities that we are introducing in WorkPoint 365 version 3.9, and how these relate to case management.
Hi, welcome all. Sorry for the confusion here. I was muted, so I'll just try to repeat myself. I think Simone and I are having some trouble today starting the live event in the right way, but I think I have sound now, so you can hear what I'm going to talk about. Thank you, Simone, for the presentation on case management. I think what I'm going to tell here will tap quite good into what you have been telling us about. I will explain you a bit about the new features that are coming here in WorkPoint 3.9. And the overall topic for that release is very much related to case management, because that's a lot about how can we actually handle tasks in a smarter way. That was actually where we started when we wanted to design these new things. So although it's not called anything with task, it's very much related to task, or you can say that task management is often a very common use case for the features, or at least the first three features that I'm going to show you here today. I've planned some demo that we will go through, so we'll also be able to go into the product and see how things work, also get a bit behind the scene and see how things are configured, and hopefully what you get from this is a kind of a feeling about what can we use the new features for, and maybe have a little idea about how should they be configured. So the first thing I'll talk about is template management. We have had template management for many years. That was one of the first things that we actually built into the product more than 10 years ago. But that has only been for documents. That has been for defining templates for all of your documents. And that has been proven to be a very valuable feature of WorkPoint and is being used in most solutions today. However, there's also a need for having templates for other things. That could be task, for example. Could also be one you want to define a register of risks, for example, that you can add to your case or to your project or what it may be. And also the need for actually having multiple template libraries. So two things here that templates are not only for documents anymore, it's also for any items that you can define in a SharePoint list, or for folders actually also. So you can also use it for defining folder structures that you can add to your case. And then the other thing, having the ability to create multiple template libraries. Saying that, a lot of the things that you already know from our template management today is something that you can reuse. The way we're doing things is kind of the same way. So all the features that you had for the document libraries are more or less available now for these new libraries. Some of the things we have added on top of what we could before is a more intelligent way of filling in data automatically when using templates, and that is related to dates and user fields. So being able to assign a task to a specific person at the right time is very important to have an efficient workflow in your system. So we can assign tasks to users now, for example, based on entity roles. That could be an example, but also doing some smart calculation on dates, like, well, this task should always be something that you do at the end of the month minus 5 days, for example, or it should be the first following 1st of March that we'll meet based on some date, or it should be 1 week before deadline of the case. And this kind of calculation is something that we are able to do now, and that way we can actually using templates to help the user create a realistic plan for your case or for your project by setting all of this automatically. Also, the fact that we can now use documents, or actually also task, if you wanted that, any item coming from other systems or locations. And by other systems, I still mean within your SharePoint solution or your SharePoint tenant. But it could be that you had templates in or documents defined in another SharePoint site that you want to use in WorkPoint, or you maybe have another WorkPoint. Maybe you have a WorkPoint to manage all your quality processes, and in there you had checklist that was defined, and then you want to use these checklists as template for another WorkPoint solution. That is also something that will become possible now. So some of the use cases for template management, just to highlight a few here, is that, for example, you wanted to be able to create folder structure on a case from a template library. So it's not only a single folder, but maybe it's a complete structure, so a hierarchy of folders that you're adding as you need them. Also adding tasks from a template list and assign the task to case responsible and calculate due date. Maybe you want to add checkpoints to a checklist without any duplicates. Things like that could be typically use cases of this. But let's go to the system and see how this could actually look. I've now launched a WorkPoint demo solution that we have built for this purpose here of showing these features to you. And the solution here is built out of 3 modules. We have clients, and then we have a case module called financial statements beneath. And we also have contacts with it. So it's a very typical case management setup. Things could be named different, but this is something that we meet very frequently. And if I go to one of the cases that I have on this system here, I can show you in here how we're actually able to use templates today for task. So here I have the different, it's the most common used list that you've probably already seen in your solution. But if I go here to task, you'll see that I have a task list here that I can use for this case. Just one thing to note here is that this is actually the new Microsoft list that are being used here. So we are not using the old classic task list anymore. We have now introduced the option of supporting the new lists here, and our task web part will actually also be able to support it. Anyway, if I want to create a task here, I have created a button up here, create task, and that's the same way that you wanted to, if you wanted to create a document, you could create the same kind of button here. But what that does is it starts our wizard that you already know. It's the same wizard as you have seen before. It's the advanced document wizard that has actually been extended, so it now supports all kind of different items and folders for that sake. But what you can see here is I can filter based on a taxonomy here. I can say I only want tasks related to meetings, or it should just be general task. So you can actually have some structure in the way you want to organize your templates. It's also possible to filter this list here. So maybe depending on your case type, you only see a certain set of tasks here. So if this was another task type or case type, I would like to see some other tasks being available. Some other things you can see in here is that some of them has this warning mark here, which actually means that this cannot be created because it already exists. That's because that on a template level, we can now define that, well, this template is only allowed to be used once. It could be a situation like with a checklist, for example, or with tasks actually, that you will not allow them to create more instances of them, just to be sure that people are using the system in the right way. So we have an option directly on the template saying that, can I use that in multiple places? Of course, within the same case, if you were on another case, you'll still be able to use it. But here you'll see that, well, the first meeting and the report, first and second draft, is already available. You can also see in the background that prepare material is actually available, but in my template, I define that, well, it's okay for me to add that twice, so I can do that. But when I want to add a task, I just click here. I note, well, these I want to add to my list. I click finalize, and then I'm being sent to the next screen here, where I can just put in metadata, for example, for each of them if I wanted that. A lot of this is coming from the template itself. I won't do any changes here. I click save, and what will happen now is that the task is being created, all the 3 tasks are being created, and the system now reload the browser, and you'll see that I've added some more tasks here now to this list. Some of the things that are interesting here is the fact that the due date and the assign to was set automatically. You can see here up in the case responsible that Jesper Jensen was the responsible, so he's being assigned to all tasks. If I had more different roles here on the case, I will also be able to distinguish between which different types of tasks should be assigned to who. So there's a lot of options on how I can do this. I'm also able to set the due date here, and that relates to different things, which we'll see in the configuration just in a while. But mainly it's regarding the due date. That depending on the due date, I set up a different date here. Another way of using this new template features that you introduced is for folders. So I also added a list here for folders. That will be something that we'll be using for the documents here. And you can see here, I don't have any folders added directly. And of course, I could go into standard SharePoint or WorkPoint Express or whatever you may use, create the folder. But in many scenarios, in order to standardize things, it could be nice that users are using the same kind of architecture of folders or the structure of folders on the case. So if I create a folder here by using the new template feature, again, it's the same wizard that loads. My folders are again being categorized. I don't have any subcategories here, but I could have different set of folders depending on case type or something like that. But you can see here, I have, for example, planning documents. I want to add that here. So I'll just click finalize, click save. And now this folder is actually being loaded or being added to the case. And one of the things you should notice here is not only the root folder. If I navigate into this folder, you will see that it has subfolders. So I think this is a good way of standardizing how you're using folders out in your solutions. The way this is being set up is that if we go to the administration of WorkPoint here, we have changed a bit here at the template management area. Before there was a record here, but I think that was called template library because we only had a single library before. Now we have it's called template management, and if I click on that, you will be able to see the different template libraries that I have available in here. I'll probably call them library/list here, but it's basically the same thing in here. It's just a matter of which kind of items are we targeting. But you can see here for this solution, I have the template libraries. That's the standard library that we have had all the time. It's working as you have been used to. A few more features have been added, but everything is similar. There's a few things to notice here. You cannot delete the template library, the standard one, and it's also the only library supporting mail merge or inserting data automatically inside the document that we also have been using for many years. But then I have added the task template library here. I've added the folder structural template library here. And what that is basically just a list or a library in the root of WorkPoint. And we can actually see that if I just go to this, tab here, you can see here in the root of my solution, I have a library for all my tasks. What you can see here is there's a lot of the fields that you have known all the time, which template the term set that defines which category it belongs to. Is it requiring specific term sets, the language if that's relevant, which business module is it target for, and we have this option now, allow multiple instances and so on. There's a lot of different things here. Some of the things I'll just point out in here that I've actually added a 2-column here. This is something I have set up, which is called offset days and offset month. And what that means is that, well, when I create a task like that, I want it to be set 3 months before plus 15 days. So that's a way that we can actually determine the date of the task or the due date. If we go back to the template setting here, and I try to look deeper into the template library here for tasks, you can see that this interface actually looks quite similar to what you're used to, or at least we had this. You can select the fields and select which inherited type you want. And that means which of all the fields from this library do I want to move to the instance that I create from it. So when I'm creating a task, in this case, I says that the assigned to should be coming from this template library and the due date and some other, for example, priority here. What do we have here? Start date and so on. I can define exactly which field from here do I want to pass on to the end task. And there are, of course, some system fields that you probably don't want, but there could be a situation where this also makes sense. Then a new thing we've added is this called mapping field, and that is where you actually define for each field, and it's only for person field and for date field that you design how do I actually want them to be mapped to some data. If we look at the assigned to here, in this case, I'm setting up a mapping saying, well, if I'm using this for the business module called financial statement, I want it to be mapped to the case responsible. So whenever I may use this on a case in this system, it will be set to the case responsible. But I could pick another field here, for example, the case assistant if I wanted that. And I can create an activation condition here, and that's kind of the same idea as we have with security rules, for example. Well, this mapping only becomes active if my activation condition here is true. So the case, use case of this could be that I divide my templates into different types of tasks. And if it's type A, I want it to be the case responsible. If it's type B, I want it to be the case assistant instead that are being hit by this mapping. Looking at the due date, what you'll see here is that it's the same principle. I go in and say, well, for financial statement, I want the date to be calculated. In this case, I say I want it to be due date plus, and then I have the 2 fields. I have added the offset month, which you saw in the library before. These are some fields I picked from the list, from the template list, and in that way, I'm actually able on my template to define exactly how should the end due date be related to the due date on the case. This is the due date coming from the case. It could also be one of the other dates here, or actually today. So it could be related to when I create a task. It could always be like this should be due 2 weeks after I create the task. This is also possible using these settings here. Again, I have the activation condition, so I can really define many different mappings for different scenarios. Another mapping type that you can also use is what we call next recurrence. And that's a way that we can actually say that, well, looking at today, I want it to be the next monthly recurrence, for example. And what that means is that if we go to the task template here, I have set here on the first template, I have set the due date to be the 1st of November. So looking at today, where we have we are in February, so the next first monthly recurrence will be the 1st of March. It could be something like that you have tasks that should always be set the end of the month, or it should always be the 1st of September, for example, because of some other requirements. So there's a lot of more details about that in our documentation, and it's something that you probably should look into if you have some more advanced requirement for mapping these fields. But you just need to know that this is possible. Okay, moving back to my slides. Another thing we added was extension to our entity copy wizard. And that was actually something that was also targeted the idea of when you're having a case that you've been working on, and many cases are something that you might need to repeat. It could be that you're in the accounting sector and you need to do a financial statement every year. So therefore you need actually to copy the case every year, do the same thing again. What we introduced, we have had the entity copy for a while that makes it possible to take an entity and do a copy with site and everything. But what we can do now is something we call time displacement. And that means that we will be able to move dates in a smart and intelligent way. So you can, for example, say, I want to copy a case and move all dates 1 year. Or I'll copy a case and select a new due date, and then the system will set the dates accordingly. Also, being able to reset certain fields. So instead of just copying every field from a task, you might want to say that, well, the task status that should be reverted back to not started. And actually also being able to reset to template, and that's something brand new also. So if you have created a task or actually also a document from a template, you can define, and that can be on a document or task level, that this one, I want that to be reverted back to the original template when I do an entity copy. So I'm kind of starting from the beginning again, filling out the document or working with the task. So the use cases of this, just to summarize, that could be cases that need to run on a yearly basis, for example, financial cases. Create projects similar to previous project with an identical timeline. So if I had done a big project and now I want to do something new, I would maybe start from an existing project. Maybe I only want to copy the task along. We'll see how that works. And then it will reallocate all times set on the task. And also being able to use the previous case as template for new cases. You can say that's kind of like the similar project that we've done, but you could actually define a set of cases or projects and say, well, these are something that I said, these are templates. Then you can go into them and create a copy of them and use it actually as a template for entities. Back to the system here, and go to the front page here of my case that I'm working on. What you can see here is that I have some documents, I have some tasks here that I've been working on. What I want to do now is do a copy of all of this. So I click copy up here, and then I'm being guided through this wizard. First of all, I can choose what do I want to include. Actually, do I want to include a document? Maybe I don't want to do that. Do I want to include task? This I can actually not turn on or off here. And that's because for each of these settings in the configuration, we can actually lock things. So if we had some business rules saying that you should always copy this, we can actually make sure that they're doing it the right way. And I can also define, do I want to reset them while doing this, or do I want them to keep them just as they are? If I click select and continue now, then here I can select, well, currently the due date is set to the 1st of December. But if I wanted to replace it with something else, I could say that either I could say I'll displace it by a year. So I'll move the new case 1 year, or I could say that, well, it should be a fixed time that I'll do this. So maybe I'll pick something from the calendar saying that I know the due date here should be the 22nd of June, for example. And it says that, well, then I'm moving the original project 162 day, or actually minus here, because I can see the due date says to 21. So let's pick something that is a bit far in the future here, the following year. So here it says 203 days after the current date, I'm moving everything. I click select and continue, then I'm seeing our standard interface here for entering data. I click save, and now it's actually doing a copy where everything is being, not everything, the site is being copied, the metadata of the case, and then what you saw was that I selected to include the tasks as well, so they will also be moved to the new site, and you will see that the times has been displaced. While we're waiting for this to complete, I'll just go quickly to the administration here. Go to my module. This is the case module I'm working on, and I'll see the copy settings here that I have. And this is the interface where you set everything up here, the way you want to make time displacement. You can lock all these things down, as I said. Actually, a lot of what you can do in here is what you actually also are setting up in your wizard, but you can actually lock things and make this wizard simpler if you wanted that. And down here, you actually specify exactly, well, which fields should be time displaced. Are there any fields that should be excluded, for example, the status, because I want to revert that back to the original thing. If I go back to here, you'll see that the job is now running, actually. And you can see that just in a while, it's copying all the items now. Then that should be done. And I can go to the site now. And now I've created a new site collection or a new case as a site collection. And you can see that all the due dates here are now something called 2022. So they have been removed, not removed, have been replaced with the original dates. So a good way to do things a lot smarter in WorkPoint. Going back to my presentation. The last major feature that I think that relates to tasks here are our wizard for batch updating. And that's a new wizard that supports updating multiple items in a single step. It makes it possible to change dates and user field across the solution. So for this version, it's only dates and user field, which we think will be the most commonly used. And you'll be able to find items across the solution using advanced search. So the use cases of this would be, you'll be able to reassign tasks across the solution. If an employee stops or needs to be replaced, you can now search for all tasks he's been assigned to and reassign the task to another person in one step. But also maybe change due date on task across your solution. If you have new deadlines on a specific type of task, you maybe you need to go in there and look at that. And that is also something that is now possible. Again, let's go to the system and see how that actually works. Because if I go to the front page here of WorkPoint, I have created a page called Task Search. I'll just navigate to that. And what this is using is our advanced search that you probably know already. I've just defined something set up something very simple here. But I'm searching here for tasks across the solution. In this case, I'm just seeing all tasks. I can filter them down, saying I only want something that is maybe not started, if that is what I wanted it. And then that way I can actually filter down and find some specific task that I'm looking for. It could also be search for everything that Jesper have done. And then when I have defined found the ones that I want to change, I can click on them. And now we have this new option here, the send to option here. And that is something new that we have added to our advanced search and our search settings, being able to take a search result, highlight a specific set of, or pick a specific set of items, and then send them to a wizard. We have two types of wizards that we can send to currently, and that is the batch update, which I'm going to show you now, and the other one is a copy item. So this could actually be a place where you'll go in and find tasks or documents in somewhere else and copy them into your case as well. So it's another way of thinking about templates. But in this case, I just want to update these things. I find them, click batch update. And then I'm being guided through a very short wizard where I see, well, the assigned to, that should be set to Lone instead. And I can click update. And of course, I'm being warned now that I'm going through this. And now the system will start a job. And of course, that could take a while because you could actually mark up a lot of different items here in one go. Maybe you saw that there was paging on this web part, but if I actually had multiple pages, maybe I'm searching for something where there could be hundreds of results. If I select all, I'm actually being able to mark everything across the pages. So I get everything in one step, and I can update hundreds of thousands of items in one go. Now the system has actually updated these three tasks that are found across the solution, and imagine how much work that will have taken previous to this feature. And just the final thing, if I'm on a case using our Express panel, I'm actually also able to start things directly from the Express panel here and use the function directly through here. So this could be searching documents in another place, sending them to this, copying them to this case that I'm working on, or things like this that can actually be embedded in here directly. Okay. And the last thing, I will not do any more demos today, I think, but I'll just briefly discuss these final things and improvement that we should talk about. The first thing here is site collection provisioning without app permissions. It has been, for some customers, it has been an issue that when we want to create sites in WorkPoint, if we want to create a site collection, we really need to have permissions to do that. And that requires quite a lot of permissions on your tenant. And for some customers, they're complaining that we cannot allow your app to have these permissions. So we have been looking in for a solution for enterprise customers where permissions to create site collections can be done in another way if that could not be provided to us. Basically, what that means is that we have actually split the provisioning of site up into two. So before it was one job you did. First of all, you need to create the site collection. That's the first issue, because that requires a lot of permissions. Then you need to install our WorkPoint app. That also requires a lot of permissions. When the WorkPoint app has been installed, then we have permissions to the specific site collection and nothing else. And then we can set up a WorkPoint and the WorkPoint site and mark it as ready for use and it is available for the end users. This has been now split up, so now you're actually able to create the site collection yourself in your tenant, install our WorkPoint app, and then register them in WorkPoint to be used. And that is done through, we have created some PowerShell commandlets that can be run at your customer, so that everything runs within the permissions that the customers have, and it's not something that is provided to us. And what these scripts are doing is basically in the end of the job, when the WorkPoint has been installed, the WorkPoint app has been installed, it is being registered in our backend using our API. So WorkPoint knows now there's a site collection ready for use, and it can take it from there. So if you meet these kind of issues out there, we now have a solution for that. Some of the last improvements that I just want to highlight here before we end the session is our advanced search that has been quite greatly improved. We have added the capability to search for items now. We can search across your tenants, so not only within your WorkPoint solution, you can search for other things using our advanced search. You can use entity properties in your base query. What that means is that if I'm on a project, the project has a project type, I can use that directly in a query. So I'm seeing things only related to the project type in other places. And as you saw, we can select items from search result now and start a visit, a copy item or a batch update. Also, our task overview web part that has been redesigned now, so it support any list. Before it was only the classic task list that was supported. Now we support any list, and you can actually define the filters yourself. And there's a lot of settings on that one now, so we could use it for anything, and actually also for things not being task. It could be for other things where you just have a similar thing you want to show. And then our embed web part, which has also very recently been introduced, is now using is being able to use the current user as a parameter. So that means if I'm using it to display a Power App or a Power BI report, I can actually pass in the current user as a parameter now. Okay, that was almost half an hour. Are there any questions out there?
Yeah, we just have a short question from, actually I can't see who it is, but it doesn't matter, and I'll just answer it briefly. The question is whether these new features like template management is included in any of our current business or enterprise license plans. And for now, they are available as options to the enterprise license plan, but they are not included. If you have can see that you have customers who really could use some of this, please reach out to our sales department. They will be more than happy to discuss this with you. You will get an addendum to the current price list together with the when this next version of WorkPoint 365 is going live in next week. Elsewise, we don't have any more questions. Feel free to contact us or your general WorkPoint point of contact if you have any questions for the things that we have seen today. Elsewise, both Allan and I would just like to wish you all a very nice weekend, and thank you very much for joining in. See you later.